Welcome everyone to Almost Cancelled. I am Peter, and today I'm going to be talking about Superman and Lois Season 2, Episode 2. It's called The Ties That Bind. So, full spoilers for the episode. As always, so I was pretty down in the last episode. I think this episode is better, I'm happy to say. Although not perfect, some of the plot threads that I wasn't fond of are still going, and I don't think they are necessarily eradicated this episode, just to use a word from the show. But I think it does make some improvements in some areas, and I'm enjoying the main plot, despite the fact that I don't necessarily think I need a doomsday story. I do think the build to it this episode is mostly pretty fun, and I'm kind of like, I'm along for the ride on that stuff. One of the big improvements from episode 1 is definitely the portrayal of Natalie. I think Natalie suffered in the last episode of just being this kind of one-note plot point of, I'm mad that I'm not in my world anymore, and we don't get to see her go through any of those moments, as I complained last time. We just hear her complain about them after the fact. And I think this episode improves a lot. One, because we get to see more of her character. We get to see what she likes to do. She's got interests in mechanics and building things and fixing things. She bonds with Sarah over that, which I think benefits both of them. For Sarah's sake, it's a nice counterbalance to the otherwise crappy teen drama that's going on with her plot. But generally speaking, it was just like, we actually get to see her make this new friend. We get to see her reach out. We get to see her react to someone who does show her a bit of interest. It actually gives us some of the meat and potatoes of what's happening here. And it's like, okay, right, so she seems to be getting on well enough with the boys. Like, she doesn't seem to be awkward with them, which is nice. I mean, there's almost a little concern, actually, given what Sarah reveals to Jordan later on, that she kissed a girl at camp. And tries to say it didn't mean anything, it was just a camp thing, and Jordan's awkward about it. Although he's not awkward specifically because it was a girl. He's just awkward because she kissed someone. Maybe the fact that it's a girl is maybe going to lead to an interesting angle on this that maybe I couldn't have predicted before, that maybe they'll explore something. But I am a little bit worried, and this is the CW fear coming in, that Jordan's going to get worried that she's because she's getting friendly with Natalie, that he's going to start getting jealous and thinking that's a romantic thing, when I think nothing so far feels romantic about that. It just feels like a good friendship that's blossoming. But I'm worried that they're going to go down that jealousy path. Now, to be fair to the character and the writing, he doesn't, I think his reaction in the scene is fine. I don't think it's over the top. I think it feels fairly natural. I just wish we weren't doing the plot. I just can't be bothered with she kissed someone at camp over the break and now they're awkward. We went through 2 episodes of her kind of dodging him and being kind of cold and distant from him. So now we're going to go through the opposite, because now she's going to keep trying to reach out because she feels guilty, and he's going to be the one who's avoiding her and being cold and being distant, most likely for at least an episode. And maybe they'll resolve it and they'll be happy again. They'll reach this understanding or something. But I just, this is the teen drama bollocks, which this show did a good job of kind of doing interesting things with last season and sort of avoiding the pitfalls. I would describe this so far as not really doing that, which is a shame. So, because it just happened. It just happened off camera when we weren't looking, and all of a sudden we have to deal with this. So again, this is a case of if we'd seen it happen, if we sort of built up to it and we actually saw the kiss, or we saw the moment, then we could sympathize why she had a moment of weakness, or why she was caught off guard, or whatever the reason might be, whatever the scenario was. Even if it is just villainous and she said, "To hell with Jordan, I'm going to go kiss people," and at least if we saw that, we'd be like, okay, so this is a character beat that she is wanting to move on, or she's feeling distant from Jordan or something. It would be something, instead of just, we've just skipped in time and now we have to deal with this thing that happened off camera and I don't care about it. So yeah, I mean, that's probably the biggest complaint I have of the episode, is that Jonathan doesn't have too much to do here. He's just concerned that his rival in school is on steroids because he's suddenly bench pressing a lot of weight. So Honestly, the scenes were fine. Like they were kind of like amusing and quick enough that none of this was a big deal. It was just kind of like there was an energy to them, and him looking kind of concerned and like, oh, and my little weight's not as impressive as that. Um, but you know, looking elsewhere in the episode, if I've got to get more negative stuff out of the way first, so everything with Lois's boss at the paper, this was one of the few things actually that I wasn't really that fond of in season one, even though season one was mostly pretty good. Was just kind of their dynamic once it got going. It kind of felt weird just how bossy and in charge this character became when she's working with Lois Lane, who's a prize-winning reporter who's worked all over the world and done much bigger things. And that, I'm not saying that's the problem right now specifically. Like that's kind of like whatever. I don't know if it's faded necessarily, but I wouldn't say I felt that specifically in this episode. But there was kind of this like, I mean, maybe it's a genius idea in that we feel like Lois does, where she doesn't want to deal with whatever's going on at the paper, and she's just trying to like fob it off. But every time like she walked into this newspaper office, and the character started going on about this podcast and how our old cases or old stories being reopened because people are recanting their story about this cult. It was like, what was this? Like, I don't know. There was just something about it that, you know, ultimately this paper here exists for Lois to have something to do, so that she has a job, so that she's still being a reporter of some kind. I wouldn't say I've ever found the actual place or its tie into any of the story that interesting or exciting or engaging. It just kind of exists. And I think when the show uses it and tries to build drama around it like this, where it's like, no, you have to be honest with me, Lois, because one of your old sources is recanting their story, and this might come back and bite us in the ass, and we have to deal with this. I did feel a little bit weird about it, because it just kind of felt like, well, I don't really care about this paper. I don't really care about this paper going under. Obviously, the big thing is that it ties into Lucy at the end. Right? So Lucy Lane, her sister, who was in Supergirl way back in season 1 of Supergirl, and then was just dropped off the face of the earth. Turns out she got in with a cult and tried to commit suicide, and this is, you know, why Lois took the cult down. I don't know. I don't know what to make of this yet. Like this came, like I knew she was showing up. I mean, I'd forgotten, admittedly, but I you know, I remember the stories of, oh, Lucy's coming back and she's going to be on Superman and Lois. And I was like, okay, that's a bit weird, because like they got rid of that character because she, well, let's be honest, she sucked. She sucked on Supergirl. She was like one of the worst things about season 1 of that show. So very weird that she's coming back at all. It makes sense, obviously, that we're bringing in Lois's sister that she's supposed to have. That makes sense, but it just, like, she wasn't a good character. Maybe she'll be better written here, and that's fine. Her coming back into it, though, because she was part of a cult and it led to her trying to commit suicide, and now she might be like speaking out against Lois in some way, is such a weird, just like out of nowhere thing. It's hard to kind of, I don't feel anything for it yet. I don't know how I feel about it. It's weird. It's weird. I'm not. I wouldn't even say I'm intrigued. I'm just like, what are you doing right here? So what is this? And I'm sure thematically it may end up tying into other things or whatever. But this plot line so far is just kind of like, what's going on here? I don't understand what you're doing. And again, I'm sure thematically maybe it'll tie in nicely to what else is going on in the show. I'll give it a fair chance, but like I didn't get excited when she said Lucy's name. I just kind of went, "Oh, okay, all right." That's what we're doing then. All right. Yeah, her working with John Henry, to, you know, deal with the earthquakes. It's fine. Obviously, it ties into the main story with Superman and Clark and all that. I would say that, you know, there's a couple of moments where we're still doing him like seeing his old dead wife when he looks at Lois. Those moments, I mean, they're mostly fine. It's just that minor concern that they're going to try and maybe do a plot at some point where he is kind of like in love with this Lois and he's weird about it or something. Like, you hope it. I really hope it doesn't go down that path. Again, this is kind of the CW fear, is that there's all these really just crappy romance and drama potential plots that they could do that I just like, just please avoid it. Avoid all of it. It makes sense that he has these moments, don't get me wrong. He's seeing effectively his dead wife. And it was filmed well. You know, there's that moment where he's looking at like this in the flashback. He's seeing her stand at the window, and she turns around and smiles. And then Lois in present day kind of turns around and has a similar smile. So it was a well directed moment. I'm not going to critique the direction there. But yeah, so that's pretty much it. Although he's insisting that he's not putting on the suit again. He's not, you know, he's going to be a dad now. He's not going to be a superhero. So that's not happening. Obviously that'll change by the end of the season. I have no doubt. If anything, I suspect that Natalie's going to build herself her own suit or steal his suit and go and joyride in it first. So, but yeah, the main plot, which was the best part of the episode and definitely fun, and luckily it took up enough time of the screen time that it did kind of like outweigh any of the other negatives that I had this episode. Clark's getting more of these weird headaches and visions, and Lois makes a reasonable get. Honestly, like, I never thought it was this, and you know, I think for the audience it was clear that this was tied to, you know, Doomsday coming up through the ground and the earthquakes, but her suggestion is not stupid. Her suggestion makes a lot of sense for the characters in the show to suggest, right? The idea that maybe this is some sort of lingering effect from having Zod inside them and their memories of Krypton exploding or something. Because, you know, he's remembering earthquakes, he's remembering screaming, he's remembering destruction. And that's kind of what they assume. And despite the fact that he's having these issues and he collapses at breakfast, he does fly off to help a situation at one point. And I think this is a really well done little scene, I thought, because the bad guy like breathes in some gas that gives him some powers, and you know, presumably from ex-kryptonite, because we find out that they're basically smuggling the shit and selling it. He like punches Superman and he like goes into like a vehicle, and we see like some of the guards or soldiers who are about kind of like fall back with the impact. I thought it was just a really nice little moment to show like, oh shit, like if this guy can do this to Superman, like everyone else is in danger. Like they kind of sold, and it wasn't even a reaction because you didn't really get a close up of any faces reacting to him being punched like that. But it was more just there's a natural collateral like shockwave of like him taking that kind of blow and taking that kind of damage. And then he gets Hulk smashed. He gets smashed into the ground. Only twice, but it's still very Hulk smashy. And then the team of Supermen show up. One of which is the teenager with the super speed from last season. Which Clark does point out that you've got an 18-year-old on your squad. That seems a bit young. So America First dude, he's like, you can't interfere with our operations, and he's like, there's people getting, you know, threatened with guns. I was saving people. It's my thing. I'm Superman. Have you heard of me? And he says, I don't care. It was an operation. This guy's smuggling stuff, and we were going to deal with it. So you don't have free reign. It all leads to him going to Morgan Edge for help. You know, I think he sees him earlier on in the episode. And it's a bit of a silence and alarms style. Like he goes to the cell and he's got all the red solar light. I do have one big problem actually with the main plot of this episode. Is I'm not so sure why. And it's especially bad because later on in the episode, Lois actually says to Clark, "It's not your fault, Clark. There's no way you could have known that Morgan Edge had his powers back." And then my response to that is, why would you assume that he didn't? Under what circumstance? Like, I know his powers were gone for a bit after the big solar blast thing from the end of last season, but I don't understand why you would assume that would be permanent. Why that the second you take him out of that red solar light prison, that he's not just going to have powers again. And it is the most non-thing when he just casually reveals that he has powers when Superman's in a moment of peril, because that's his moment to strike. So I did think this just like stupidity from like every character, as far as like Morgan Edge possibly having powers still. I do think they all look like idiots in this episode because of that. Like I can't fathom why you wouldn't assume that maybe he could have his powers back, and then to sort of gloss over, oh, you couldn't have known. Like, why wouldn't it be your first thought? You should assume that he does. You should assume like, I don't know if it's a test you can run, but you should assume, if there's no test, you should assume the worst, that he has his powers, and act accordingly at all times. The fact that you didn't is insane. But aside from that, I did like the rest of this plot. I love Jordan coming with, obviously Jordan's been tied to the romance drama, so I really like that he got something else. Much like Sarah having like her moments with Nat, and even though the Natalie scene kind of like boiled down to them talking about Jordan, I still like them bonding. It still felt like a nice positive thing. It felt like two characters finding each other. It's nice that Sarah will have another friend that isn't the two boys. I think that's a good dynamic for the show. And Jordan, likewise, I appreciate that he's like, no, let me feel useful. I'm getting better at controlling my powers, and I don't trust Morgan Edge. And he's right not to. In fact, Jordan's the only one who suspects that maybe Clark might need backup. So Clark gives in and lets him come with, and luckily he does. And I do like the play on the standoff from last season, where Jordan gets in front of Clark and says, "No, like you're not, leave him alone. You're not passing." And Morgan Edge like, "Yeah, we've done this before, you and I." And then Jordan just like blasts him with some heat vision. And it's like, oh, he's got more control over this now, and he lands some punches. Now it still obviously makes sense that Morgan Edge will quickly grab him and be like, nah, like I'm still too strong and powerful for you, which is correct. That should be the case, but it's showing just how much he's coming along and that he is able to hold him for a little bit. The big thing in this scene, though, is of course the mother, Lara. Obviously Jor-El kind of met his demise. The after image, the hologram crystal. But we do have one of their mother that Morgan Edge had, and so we get to see Clark meet her, and she meets Jordan, and we get a bit of the Morgan Edge stuff with like, you abandoned me, blah blah blah. That's all fine enough, but she scans Clark when he has one of these tremor moments, and basically she uses a lot of big words from what we hear later, but ultimately there's another being causing this. There's a tie to another being, and of course, like at this point, like it has to be Doomsday. If it's not Doomsday, then it's like a swerve. It's almost like they want to trick people who know the comics and know the main Superman plot lines. Like they want to swerve them. It's not swerving like your average Joe audience by any means, but maybe they do want to swerve us. but aside from that, it's definitely Doomsday. So, but no, I like them realizing this at the end. I like them tying it to the earthquakes and sort of like being smart, being somewhat proactive, and putting the evidence together. Which is why it's frustrating that they're being so stupid about Morgan Edge possibly having power still, or why these other like things in the episode that make characters feel like they're being dumb or acting unreasonably. So, but yeah, I'm enjoying the build. There's a scene when that earthquake happens while he's in the other fortress. We get like lights on Doomsday's outfit, like just being the only thing we can see, and some miners get killed. Miners, as in, not children, the profession to miner. No one says it like that, but you know what I mean. The miners get killed. I will say I rolled my eyes at the end though, because the woman that they go and speak to, that Lois and Boss Lady go and speak to at the quarry, like she's very nice to them, and at the end of the episode, it's like she's on the phone and she's like, "Yeah, something did come up, and it's even more powerful than we hoped." It was really cheesy. It was like 101 stupid villainous cliffhanger, but the actual build to Doomsday I actually think was mostly entertaining, and the fact that it was kind of like rippling through multiple threads of the episode and kind of like came together at the end, I really appreciate that. I always like when writing can do that. It's there are some character issues right now that really should be dealt with. The one thing I've not talked about is Lana and Kyle. That's the one. Took me a minute. So the dude running for mayor drops out, and he's like, "I got an offer. This mayor thing's not a sure thing, so I'm leaving. I'm going to go do this job elsewhere." And I kind of like the overall point of this plot, which is ultimately that Kyle says, like, why are you looking for other people to run for mayor? Because she's got a list and she's saying, what about this guy and what about this guy? And this only had one ending, right? The ending of this plot line, this episode, had to be why don't you run for mayor, Lana? You care. You're putting in all the work, and like, do it. And even for Kyle to be the one to suggest it is a good moment for him, because it's him growing and kind of like saying, no, I will support you, and like, I'll be the first man of the town or whatever. But no, like this had to be the ending. The only complaint I really have about it is that it was almost frustrating in that scene where she's got the list of names and they're kind of like one by one saying, nah, this doesn't, not him, nah, people hate him, or no, he's moved, or he's retiring, or like the entire time I'm like practically, internally yelling at the screen, what about you? Why not you, Lana? You can be mayor. Doesn't have to be a dude. It can be you. And so it's minorly frustrating in that scene, but at least you do get to have the payoff that Kyle's like had the entire fire department like sign a letter of support for her to be mayor. So the ending's fine. The overall point of what it's doing is fine. And I'm glad that there's not him being jealous of the dude. Like, I'm glad that's done with. I felt like it was probably done last episode, and we kind of like used it in a nice way. And then here it is truly done. The guy seems to be gone, and now we're going to have Lana running for mayor. Will that be an exciting plot? Will that be something that's compelling? I don't know, but it is so far. The character stuff is makes enough sense with it. So yeah. So it's a better episode because it's mostly the main plot and just that being a bit more fun, and there being a more teasing of what's to come, being exciting. I do think Natalie has a much better showing in this episode. I like her friendship with Sarah, but the Sarah Jordan drama, unfortunately, I did not like again. And ultimately, I'm not really sure it can do something that will save it for me. I think the best thing for me on this plot is just for it to wrap up quickly and let us deal with it. I mean, ideally, he will get over in an episode or two, and then they'll make up, and we can just, ignore it ever happened, honestly. Like, that might be the best outcome, because if they have a breakup, then we have to deal with the fact that they're interacting and running into each other when they're broken up, and that honestly sounds like hell. So that's why I would rather they make up and just we go back to them being happy, at least for the most part. It's because I don't want to deal with all the fallout of the other direction. But it's sad that that's the only reason that I feel that way right now. It's not because I'm rooting for them necessarily, because as of right now, their drama's not been all that engaging. So, yeah, it's a better episode. But we're definitely not at season 1 levels yet, as far as the character drama goes, because it has been a bit more of a hodgepodge, and they're relying on some kind of out of nowhere elements to kind of make a lot of it turn. I never talked. Someone asked me in the comments last episode about Lois talking about her mother, because I never brought that up. I kind of forgot to talk about it, and honestly, I didn't like the scene that much. I kind of forgot it existed because I just I wanted to forget that it existed. And it was kind of there to try and justify why she was being so awkward about Natalie, and I don't think you needed anything else. Like, you didn't need there to be something. Like, the fact that this is her not daughter, but she was going to have a daughter named Natalie is enough to like justify like potential weirdness between the characters. There's enough there to play with, without just standard trope mummy issues coming into it. So yeah, and then again with Lois this week, just kind of bringing in this Lucy thing out of nowhere. Not that the Lucy name drops the part of it I don't really particularly like. It's more just that there's this nagging plot coming in, and it comes in a really nagging way from an outside source, where it's just, there's this podcast and it's doing these things. I'm like, oh, that's great. And then later on in the episode, so I've been listening to more of this podcast. It's went viral, Lois. They're just not entertaining scenes. They're just like, Lois walks into that newspaper office at the end, and like you see the look on the other woman's face, whose name I still don't know, for the record, and she like just the look in her face and the way she takes out of her earphones, you just know. You just know that this is going to be more about this stupid podcast and this controversy, and I'm just like, nothing about the pitch of this plot earlier on in the episode was that exciting. So I don't want more of it. Not yet, anyway. Maybe it'll be more interesting once they're actually talking about what the cult was. Once we get to see Lucy actually talk about her experiences. I don't know. Maybe there's something there. But right now, I'm not a fan of how this plot has been introduced. It has just kind of like been shoehorned in on the side, and I don't feel all that compelled to hear more of it. So we'll see how that goes. So yeah, obviously there's still things to critique. There's obviously still things that I don't think are working in the show, which is probably why this still had a relatively negative vibe, probably for most of the review. I do think the main plot's more fun though, and the build-up's pretty decent. So we'll see how episode 3 is. Hopefully it keeps, this was an improvement over the first episode, so hopefully it keeps inching back towards season 1 levels. But the CW has hurt me before, so we'll see how it goes. But yeah, let me know what you thought of the episode in the comments. Like, subscribe, ding the bell for notifications, all that stuff. Get me on the Twitters at mailed_fuzz for channel updates, but you can get me on Twitter at Wibble89, and of course you can go over to patreon.com/mailfuzztv and support everything we do and keep all the content coming for as little as $1 per month. But that is me, so thank you once again for watching or listening. Always appreciate it. Keep watching TV. Have you got any vanilla?